Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Hey, look at Dan Kent. And he's standing today.
That's right.
He's looking rejuvenated, ready to go.
Yes.
So good, so good. Hey guys, happy Muse Day. He's Dan Kent. I'm Shawna Boren, and it's really good to be here with you all on this glorious Tuesday in November. Yes. Yes, it's still November.
Yeah. What did you think it was?
Listen, I'm not going to lie. It's been a whirlwind of a week. Okay. And I'm kind of feeling like Dorothy, and I'm trying, like, where am I landing? What's happening? Like, just spinning around. But I'm confident. I'm confident that it's November.
Yes. Well, because Thanksgiving hasn't happened yet. That's a good indicator that we're still here.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that one it's pretty late this year. Like in the calendar. So yeah, but you know what? I have against my kids' protest, I have started the transition. I'm going straight to Christmas.
Yeah.
So you'll see you'll see it. That's going to go away soon, but I'm making the transition to Christmas. The stuff is up from the basement and we're doing it. And to all the eye rolls from my children, I'm doing it. I have to get to a place of joy.
That's good. I encourage that.
All right. We found ourselves in a familiar place, Dan Kent, on Sunday, and that was back in the book of Revelation.
Yes.
For Wrath of the Lamb. And we're looking at these horsemen, and Greg kicked us off with the Horse of Perpetual Ascent.
Yeah.
And I appreciated how he did that review first and then brought us right in through chapter 6. And I knew immediately that I would very much look forward to and lean upon your summary, as I'm sure most will. And this is, again, another one I will say, yes, Dan's summaries are amazing and you'll get a lot from them. If you have time and space, though, please go and watch the whole sermon, because I just think it'll be helpful, especially during this little stretch of passages. Don't you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And in fact, you've talked up my summary, and I feel like this is going to be like a terrible one because I kept listening and I took notes, but I kept getting lost in what he was saying. And so then I would stop taking notes. And then, so I don't know how good of a summary this is going to be.
Okay. Full confession, Dan. The same thing happened to me, but I thought to myself, it's fine. I got Dan's summary. So
Yeah.
I'll be fine.
Man. That the weight on my shoulders is just so, if I'm like this, it's because of the expectations. Yeah. The expectations are pretty heavy.
Oh goodness. So. Well, I have faith and I think you're going to be great. Let's just see how you do. How about that? Let's just see how it goes.
That's right. Well, the first thing I want to say is this might be one of my favorite sermon titles ever. I mean, it's very poetic. The Horse of Perpetual Ascent. It's a great sermon title. And with that, and then also we should say, in terms of part of the Dorothy experience that you're having, that we're all having, is we had the election, and last week when we recorded, we had no idea how it was going to go. And now we know. And I, for one, am thankful that it's over, that we know what we're getting and we can make the best of it. And kind of like what you and I talked about last week, I feel like, no matter who is elected, no matter which side wins, they're going to emphasize serving one group of people, and they're going to be weaker on serving other groups of people. And those are our opportunities as Christians to kind of pick up the slack. And so just knowing what we're dealing with, we can start to prepare. How can we demonstrate God's love in the world? And so for that reason, I'm grateful that it's over. And so and my prayer is that we can then work with the new kind of leadership of our country, and we can do the best to serve the people around us. And Greg sort of talked about that too, these election thoughts that he had, where he kind of talked about our polarization, and I feel like he sort of shared a similar sort of perspective. Like
Mhm.
our call is the same, no matter who
Yeah.
is in leadership. And I guess before I jump into the summary of the sermon itself, I wanted to just leave that open just in case you have anything that you wanted to say about the election, because that's such a big thing.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, I didn't know if we were, because we don't have these huge production meetings beforehand.
No.
We just kind of hop on and go. So I
Right.
didn't know if we were going to talk about this. So thank you for that. I think so. On our website is a letter that Greg put out in response to the election. And if you guys have not had a chance yet, I wholeheartedly suggest you go and read that. I really and fully believe that what we were speaking out last week at the election eve service and even in the MuseCast, because you're right, when we were doing the show, the election had not yet happened. Not everyone had voted, but we didn't know. And we said some very key things, like regardless of what happens, our call remains the same. Our call as kingdom people remains the same. Our heart postures remain the same. And so I do fully believe that. And I also echo and co-sign what you just said about depending on who is leading, there's going to be gaps of people being tended to and cared for. And what a beautiful and opportune time for the church to step in and go about being the hands and feet of Jesus. I love that. Full disclosure, it's taken me a minute to remember that and to get there, because literally, like Dorothy, I just was like, oh, okay. And this isn't a political show, so I don't know that people care about all that. I will just say that I had to process and deal with my own emotions and feelings about it all. And I am thankful to be a part of a body of believers that we hold space for one another. We don't all think the same. I know people think that we do, but we do not all think the same.
No.
Dan and I think very differently. And I think people don't understand that because we get along so well.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of being a part of this family of God, this kingdom, is that all of us with our differences, we come together and we enhance the whole. And so I had to just deal with how I felt and what I perceived the implications to be. And I had to work diligently not to allow my heart to get hard towards other people and to slip into the us versus them mindset. I really don't want any part about it. It's not helpful. And ultimately, the truth is the truth. And that is that Jesus is king. And that is that his victory is ours. And we lean into that, and we do that by just completing our mandate of loving others and just doing what we're supposed to do. That doesn't change regardless of who's running the world, the free
That's right.
country of America. So yeah.
That's right. Hey, man, I'm so glad that we took the time to do that, because that was so well said, and I appreciate that. And yeah, we do have a wide variety of perspectives on our leadership team, which I have come to find is really rare. And I think we're better off for it. And I feel better off for it. I feel better off knowing that it's okay for me to have some different opinions, and learning how to kind of be okay with other people in leadership having different opinions. And I think part of what I see in our team is we all feel comfortable holding our convictions, but we also do that with this attitude of I could be wrong, and I'm open to learning more, and I want to listen to what other people say. And I don't know, this isn't something that you can expect in leadership teams and in churches. And so I'm very grateful for it. And I hope that we can maintain that atmosphere, because it's this, it's to, in my mind, it's so similar to the disciples and the diversity that Jesus had in his group. And so I think there's something really good about it. So you can't learn surrounded by people who are just like you. You have to have different perspectives. And I'm very grateful.
You have to brush up against difference. You have to brush up against, because that's how you go, oh, like otherwise you're just always going to think everything is green, 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 green,
Yeah,
green. No,
right.
there's other colors that we need to be
Right.
introduced to. So yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, good. I'm so glad we did that. Thank you. Uh, the Horse of Perpetual Ascent. And so Greg kicked us off. We took a little time there talking about politics last week, Sunday and Monday. We had a double header last week, and so he did come back and did a little review. We are looking at this chapter 6, and the Lamb is still unsealing the scroll. And something that Greg said this week that I I want to think more about, but I'm just going to say it because I thought it was intriguing. He said that the Lamb is the unsealing of the scroll, and I thought that that was really interesting. And so, but in the language of the chapter, John talks about who is worthy to open this scroll, and it is the Lamb who is worthy. It is the Lamb that is this true, pure revelation of what God is like and what God is doing in the world and what God's plan for evil is in the world. It is the Lamb. And so by looking at the Lamb, we cut through all of the deception of the beast, of Satan, of Lucifer, of this enemy of God. By focusing on the Lamb, we see through all of that deception and lie that we are kind of inundated with all the time. Satan being the great deceiver. Now he talks about this deception, Greg does, and as sort of like the point of, or one of the points of revelation, that we are deceived, and sort of our task is to work through that deception so that we can see the light of truth. And we see this deception in many different ways throughout Revelation, and John just does this brilliant job of helping us see our deception. And one of the ways that he does that, that Greg looks at in this sermon, is he's looking at this white horse. And we find a rider on a white horse later in the book of Revelation in chapter 19, particularly verse 11. And now we know that that one is Jesus. Jesus is riding on this white horse in 1911. Well, guess what? Here in chapter 6, we've got the rider on the white horse again. But this is not Jesus. This is an imitator of Jesus, because that's what deception does. Deception latches on to truth and twists it and bends it a little bit. It can't feed on itself. It needs to feed on light. And so that's what we see here, is we see this white horse that resembles Jesus, but is in fact a fraud. It's a deceiver. The rider on this white horse is very different than the rider of the white horse in chapter 9. This white horse rider has this insatiable hunger to conquer and to have power over and to dominate God's creation. And Greg kind of points at who this rider is. Well, of course, it is the enemy, and it has the same characteristics of the enemy. This "I will ascend" mindset that we see all the way back in the book of Genesis, even, where the serpent is trying to persuade Eve to ascend, to be like God, to reach upward and to strive upward. And we see in Isaiah the same kind of Lucifer figure who fell because he tried to ascend into the place of God. And yet we have, when we see who God really is, we see a slain lamb, a God who descends, a God who serves under, not over. And so we just have these very different things. And then Greg sort of looks at this "I will ascend" mindset throughout Scripture. You see, going back to Adam and Eve, but you also have Cain and Abel, and you have Lamech, and the whole thing is just this struggle for power over each other. And Greg talks about this King of the Hill game that kids sometimes play, where you try to be on the top of the hill, and that means pushing others down and stepping on others and whatever you have to do to get to the top. And that spirit of ascension, that hunger, that desire to go higher and higher and to have more and more power, Well, that's sort of how the world operates, and we get born into that, and we just kind of naturally acclimate to that type of aspiration, and so we live in this economy that is built on this perpetual ascension that it requires growth, otherwise it collapses, and so that requirement for growth it fuels this need to always be ascending, and that is spiritually so destructive. And that means that this spirit of ascension, that is the spirit of this fraudulent white horse. This is the horse of perpetual ascent. And we are all on that horse. We're born on that horse. But, and this is the key, we are not of the horse. We are of the lamb. And but we are on the horse, and that is our battle, is to liberate ourselves from this horse of perpetual ascent. And so Greg then finishes his sermon with sort of three kind of I don't want to say tactics, but three insights that might help us free ourselves from the horse of perpetual ascent. The first one is kind of one of our foundational kind of beliefs, one of our foundational aspirations of our church is to get all of our life from Christ, to return to our first love, to not get duped into thinking that I can get life from the house I own, or from the job I have, or from whatever accolades I'm chasing. The only place that I can get satisfying life and fulfillment is in my relationship to God through Christ. The second kind of insight is to practice contentment. And I think this is just absolutely key. There's this famous passage in Philippians, I can do all things through him who gives me strength, which I've seen in many times. I think there's like a bumper sticker that says, I can do all things through a verse taken out of context. And I think that is so right, because when you look at the context of that verse, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. What Paul is talking about there is contentment. He's talking about whether I have plenty or whether I don't have plenty. I can endure either one. I can endure discomfort or comfort. I can do all of this through the strength of God. And so contentment is I think the foundational way to push back against the horse of perpetual ascent, because what you see is that our desire to ascend is mathematically related, causally related to a discontentment with where we're at. I want to go up there because I'm not happy with where I am now. The same thing with Eve. Eve wanted to be like God, because it wasn't good enough to be who she was. That's not enough. I need more. And that's discontentment. And so the best way to sort of cut off that desire for ascension is to learn more and more to be content with where we are at. And then the third one, and I'm just realizing this now, I think this is his third one. This might be his third one from Saturday night. But
I got you if you got it wrong. So let's see what you got.
All right. Let's see what I got here. What I have is to partner with God to heal the world.
You got it.
All right. Good. Yes. Well, and I think that, well, because on Saturday he had 4 and I couldn't remember which one. So, okay, good. I got it.
Well, and on Sunday morning he said 4, but he only did 3 intentionally. Really? Okay. So yeah, but he did initially say 4. So you're good.
Good. Well, and this one is simply to be faithful to God's creation and to our first mandate. And because the horse of perpetual ascent that this economy is on, that this civilization is on, it is wreaking havoc on God's creation and God's animal kingdom. And so part of pushing back against that is to live out our first mandate, which is to take care of the earth and the animal kingdom. And that by itself changes our orientation to creation in a way that hopefully disempowers this horse of perpetual ascent. And I think that would be my summary. So but there's a lot more there, like you said. So I definitely recommend people listening to it. There's a lot of nuggets in there that I didn't
Mhm.
even capture in the sermon. But what did you think of Greg's sermon?
Yeah, I really, again, I feel like I always say it's timely. Imagine that, the scripture being timely. But even just beyond how he started the service with addressing, those in America about, the election and all of that, and that reminder, I still felt like, talking about this particular horse was really perfect. Given the state of our country, but also given the season of the holidays that are upon us, and just the reminder of the danger that we all have of being comfortable on this horse and just riding along and going with the flow and knocking folks down along the way, because that's the way that you ascend, right? You don't ascend by like, at least you don't ascend by like saying, hey, we're all going to do it together. Typically it's like, nope, I'm knocking you down so I can ascend. So I thought that was a really great reminder. I don't know what you Minnesotans, I question your childhood and your upbringing, this king of the hill nonsense. Like, what? That just sounds like pure danger to me.
Yeah.
I don't know how all of you didn't end up in the ER. Dan Kent, I feel like you have 9 lives, like you and Greg both. I am perplexed.
Yeah.
We'll say that.
Hey, it was
I've
fun.
never in my life played that game. Are you kidding me? Like, what in the world? Anyway, yeah, so I thought that it was a really great reminder that, remember, the lamb, the sacrificed lamb, was the one who was worthy. And when he said, when he opened the scroll and he said, come, gosh, so many people have assumed a certain thing about that. But what we saw through Greg's teaching was that this was a summoning of evil to show its true self. So let's not get it twisted. Like, this isn't Jesus kicking tail and taking names, like so many people want to think. Like, this was him like saying, reveal yourself, show yourself. And we know that in the final judgment, everything that doesn't align with love will be burned away. And so I think we just have to keep those things in mind, and let's opt out of the power struggle. It doesn't mean that we're saying be doormats, but we're just saying let's heed the words and wisdom of Jesus and the example of him. I loved that we were able to get those 3 principles at the end. Great reminders, again, foundational to our teachings at Woodland: getting all your life from Christ, practicing contentment, and partnering with God in the work of healing in the world. And again, I think practicing contentment and partnering with God are just very apropos for such a time as this, and going into this holiday season. So I thought it was great. I'm thankful for it. And I just also, I think we need to remember, like, we're in the world, but not of it. We're on the horse, but not of it. And we have a job to like hop on down, and let's do it differently. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So I think we got in a couple of questions that make sense to do that, to address those. So I'm just going to go top to bottom, and there's 2. And you guys, I'm just going to say, those of you who sent in these questions, you know who you are. You make me smile, and I appreciate you all very much. Okay, here we go. A couple of times in recent sermons by Greg, including yesterday, so Sunday, I've gotten the impression that Eve is the one primarily responsible for the fall of humanity, and that Adam was an innocent bystander. This interpretation seems contradictory to Greg's efforts to include the voice of female theologians when he talked about desire. It is always, it's the woman. It's the woman. Yeah. Y'all better be careful.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's Adam is just this. He wasn't even there. He's just kind of hanging out.
What do you expect?
So, right.
He just kind of stumbled in and like, whoa.
I don't see what the problem is.
Poor Adam. Poor. He wasn't loved enough. Right, he wasn't appreciated enough.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And here's what I would say, just from my study of the chapter, and I think I've shared this before. Like whenever I try, I don't bat 100%, but I try to look at feminist scholars and how they interpret these things whenever I do like a serious study on something, and I think that it's amazing the insights that you get when you have different types of people who are very intelligent, who are looking at the same text. There's just all sorts of psychological kind of factors that change our radars when we look at stuff and we're able to perceive different things. That's why it's so important to be a body of Christ, not just a Lone Ranger Christian, because you simply will not see all of the light in the text if you are by yourself. And so I absolutely appreciate the feminist scholars who speak into this. But the fact is that yes, Eve played a very integral part of the failure of the Genesis story, and Adam did as well. It's just not as explicit as the role that Eve played here. I look at the story, and I'm excited to hear your take on this as well. And I'm just really struck right away by the fact that the serpent went after Eve, and that is just like, why did he go after Eve? Now, you know, traditionalists, patriarchalists might say, well, because Eve is the weaker sex. I don't think that's the case at all. I think Eve was vulnerable, but her vulnerability was not because of her gender. Her vulnerability was because of Adam's failure to communicate God's expectations to her, because God gives the expectations not to eat of the tree to Adam. And he doesn't even, he just like that was his secret with God. I mean, no, this was like, you are supposed to, this is my mandate to you, to you now have a partner in this. You have to work together. And Adam just simply was not working with Eve on this. And the serpent exploited that with Eve. And you know, there could probably be other things that you could say too. Why was Eve speaking about something she didn't know anything about? And she didn't understand what God's command even was when you read the text. And so that's what I would say, is that Adam and Eve are both suspect. But you can what you don't want to do is you don't want to get Eve off the hook, because that is just as disempowering to the female character as pretending like she's responsible for everything.
Yeah.
Both of those, I think, are ultimately derogatory to women. I think the fact that Eve had such a big responsibility in this shows how powerful and how important women are in God's creation. The fact that Eve's mistake contributed to the fall of the universe really shows the responsibility and the trust that God has in femininity. And so to get her off the hook is to also denigrate that importance. But at the same time, you have to also recognize that Adam plays an equally fundamental role in the failure. That's my take on it. I'm curious to hear what you think of it.
Yeah, no, I think you handled that very well, and my take is very similar to yours. I will say I appreciate Greg bringing up the female theologians. I think it's important, just like I think it's important to intentionally read Black theologians. I just think, like you said, you get a bit of a different perspective. We have to remember the context through which these scriptures came. And so, yeah, I think they were partners, and I think they were both complicit. I don't think it was completely the woman's fault, and I don't think that Adam was innocent. Like I said, think they were partners and complicit. And for a variety of reasons, we see Eve showcased here as the primary one. And that narrative has benefited a certain population of folks for many years. And so Yeah, but no, I think we can't agree. We can't just put this all on Eve, but nor can we let her off the hook. You know, she was complicit, as was Adam, and I feel like God meant for them to be partners, and that partnership had some cracks in its foundation, unfortunately, and we see the results of that. So
Yeah.
that's all
Awesome.
I'll add.
Yeah, good.
All right. So this one is getting back to that lovely little word wrath. You know, this sub-series is called The Wrath of the Lamb, and we've talked to people and asked them what comes to mind when they hear the word wrath in regards to God. And so this question has to do with that. Whenever I've tried to define the word wrath of God, I have started by looking at the definitions of the Greek and Hebrew words. As I recall, the best definition I have consistently landed on is fierce anger. For me, this definition contradicts the idea of God's wrath being primarily sin's consequences, which I agree with. Am I correct about the definitions I found, or is there something I am missing? How do you make sense of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that when you look at the Greek and the Hebrew for the word wrath, and I haven't actually done like a full word study on it, but what I have studied in looking at Greg's Crucifixion of the Warrior God and Cross Vision and some of the conversations I've had with Greg, basically I'm floating, I'm a barnacle on Greg's research is sort of what I'm saying here. But he would absolutely affirm that that is what the word means. But what it means for God, you have to look at more than just the word, because that meaning is meant to be a prestige, that kind of flip that we have in the book of Revelation. It's kind of like this, you know. So I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and that's who I voted for president. And I'm very disappointed that more people didn't vote for Bob. But anyway, he has a song called Mr. Tambourine Man. Well, the song is about drug use and but the language of the song is about this tambourine player. Now, when you look at the word tambourine, he's playing the tambourine. It literally means an instrument with bells on. But when you look at the context of the song, you realize that Bob is having a drug-induced experience. But the language of the tambourine is still literal, but the context shows that Bob is doing something else with this song. In the same way, the word wrath is literally this fierce anger, but when you look at the context, you see that wrath is sort of this aikido type thing that God kind of gives people over to the wrath of that. The wrath is not centered in God, and the fierce anger is not centered in God. The hostility of the wrath is within the sin itself. And God absolutely has anger and wrath toward sin because he sees its destructive consequences. But that fierce anger and wrath is not toward believers, it is towards the sin. And the punishment or the punishing kind of consequences of sin, the wrathful consequences of the sin are baked into the sin itself. And so what God does is he gives people over to what they choose, and it's the wrathful consequences of the sin itself that then hopefully reforms people or dissuades people from continuing down those paths of darkness. And so, yes, wrath is defined that way, but when you look at the context, you see how it relates to God is very different than how it relates to individuals who tend to be wrathful. That's how I would answer that.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure if that does it, but that's the best I can do.
No, I think you did great. And as per usual, context matters. And so, yeah, thank you for sending in that question. I love it that people are wrestling with this stuff. And yeah, it is that anger, but it's kind of it's more organic. Like Greg had said, it's like it's coming in on itself. And so I think that's an important distinction that hopefully folks are starting to make.
Yep.
All right, Dan Kent. Do you know what time I feel it is? Like in my bones, I feel like it's a certain time.
Well, it's 8:40, so it's nugget time.
I mean, forever and always. Nuggets.
Yes, good.
All right. Do you want to start? Do you want to finish?
I have no preference.
Okay. How about, I think you started last week, so I'll start this week and hopefully you can clean it up nicely and put the bow on it.
All right, good.
Um, my nugget is just more of a continual reflection of the things that we've already shared today, but I just really feel like it is important during this time in our lives to be mindful of the moments in which we find ourselves merrily riding along atop the horse of perpetual ascent. It can feel comfortable. It can feel, like it's well deserved, and it's a lot easier than fighting to get off and fighting to serve and be, not always striving for more. It's a lot easier than learning contentment. It's a lot easier than learning to partner with God and touching the places that there is hurt, and where healing is needed, but I think of it as like a carousel, and it's not this, but that's just the vision that keeps coming to mind for me as a carousel. You can just sit there and enjoy the ride, but truly you're not enjoying that. It's this just perpetual need for more, higher, 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 and it's not going to fulfill. And so my encouragement is just to continually be mindful of the moments in which you are sitting atop that horse, and make the conscious effort to hop down and remember, we are in this place, but we are not of this place. Our mandate is different. Our calling is different. And we look to the slain lamb, the one who was worthy to open the scrolls, for our direction and how we should be living. And so that's my nugget.
That's great. I think I will build off of that, because I think that the kind of what the perpetual growth kind of thing, it is comfortable. I mean, there is this sort of sense of entitlement that is baked into it, that I've earned this, I'm entitled to this, and in a sense we based on this system, we have a merit system, we have an economic system where this is worth that, so if you do this you get that, and but the whole mathematical system is destructive, and the destructiveness of the system is kept hidden from us by design. Otherwise, people would hopefully bow out of it. And so I think, and your point too is like it feels good, but it also doesn't. I think that's such an important insight, because look at the stress and the anxiety levels and the depression in this system. It's really hard to always have to be adding value, and it's better to live in the kingdom of God, where you can live out of the value that you already have. You have value, you have unsurpassable worth. That's what we were made to live out of. This system that we are in, it's a hustle. It's such a hustle all the time, and so there should be an inherent kind of motivation to figure a way off of that, other than just getting to the top. And I think that learning contentment, I think, is the foundation of the answer. It's for me at least. I think in 2019, I talked about hedonic adaptation, and just this idea that we get acclimated to certain levels of sensation, or taste, or comfort, or whatever. And so, like, for the example I use, is that if you drink a lot of soda, things like milk and water and things like that don't taste as good, because we've acclimated to this higher level of sweetness. And that level of sweetness is very destructive for us. And so, in order to protect ourselves, we have to get off of that ascent to sweetness. We have to come back down to a basic, what we're made for. And that is very uncomfortable, but it also provides greater life and health and things like that. And so I think that's true of all sorts of things in our culture, our aspiration for more and better and more comfort and whatever. There is a tremendous value just for us. Now, take away all of the consequences for the earth, which are way bigger than any one person can do. And so, just looking at an individual, it's just better for our own mental health, our own physical health, our own peace of mind to not to the best of our ability to get off of that hustle, to be content with less. And even if you end up with more, that's fine. But to be content with less, I think that makes us less vulnerable and more anti-fragile. And so that is my nugget: is just aspire toward contentment with less, and which is not just to say anything derogatory toward people who have more, or for yourself having more. If you're blessed with something, then great, but it's not something that you need, and it's something that is just a new level of gratitude, but it's not like this need that we have. And the more we can fight against that feeling of need for anything in the world, the better our spirits will be.
Amen and amen. All right, folks, that is today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to chatting 4 p.m. Central Time on YouTube. As always, we appreciate your questions and your comments, and if you have them, send them in. Dan's showing you right there, musecast@whchurch.org. Take care of everyone that you love. Take care of those that maybe you don't love, and let's just be that Jesus out in the world. It's going to be very needed. Have a great week, you guys.